Welcome to an unexpected edition of the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Monday, January 20th, 2025. We were not going to do a podcast today for various reasons. And then just the news over the weekend and the fact of the inaugural and the expected and in fact delivered pardons of the Biden family all, I think, conspired to lead us to believe that we could not really wait until tomorrow morning to get our licks in. So we are here this morning. I'm John Podhoretz. It's not even morning. It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon as we're talking. I'm John Podhoretz, the editor of Commentary Magazine. With me, as always, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
And senior editor Seth Mandel. Hi, Seth.
Hi, John.
So the news is crazy, but I don't know where. I don't even know where to begin. So if we're going to go chronologically, we go from the hostage deal, and the hostages being released.
Maybe we should start with our new president. We have a new president.
I know. So I'm saying we're going backwards. We're going to start. We're going to start and go backwards in time. So Donald Trump is now the 47th president of the United States, having been the 45th president of the United States. Gave a what appears to be about a 40-minute inaugural address, which for him is like the Gettysburg Address in length terms. And I'm struck by one thing, and then I just want to see what you guys think. To say that he is a different person from who he's been over the last 8 years, or in mood and feeling, I think is very, very evident. Like, there is some form of existential relief in his mien and his manner. He overcame a defeat. He overcame the lawfare. He overcame everything. He overcame an assassination. And there's a kind of, I don't know how to describe it. Even when the speech got nasty, or he started, basically he was sitting there with Biden 3 feet away talking about how awful everything in America has been for the last 4 years. It didn't have the kind of crazy edge or like really harsh, sandpapery quality than he could have.
No American carnage.
Times. Not only was there no American carnage, I would say that the speech was explicitly a repudiation of the notion that the condition that he was entering into as president was not American carnage. I mean, things were bad. The economy's bad, the border's bad, this is bad, that's bad. But the apocalyptic tone of 2017 was not present. It was like the America's revival begins today, and you know what? We're the greatest, and we got some problems, but we're going to fix them. And the problems are problems of governments, not of spirit. I mean, that's sort of what he was saying, which I thought was the most interesting. Does this jibe with your guys' feeling about it, or is my own too much time watching Trump over the years, seeing tiny differences in spirit?
There's definitely a difference in demeanor. He's more soft-spoken in public. He's not as loud or frenetic in public as he was 8 years ago. The speech actually had similarities to the first inaugural. And it was a pretty bleak portrait of the problems facing America and the world today. But I think many people would agree that there are significant problems facing America, the world today. And I think that's the difference. When Trump came to office in 2017, he was the outsider. It was a shock that he was elected to most people. He was making a critique of the American establishment and of the Obama administration that did not land in the right place for many people. They didn't understand it. It's like George W. Bush said famously at the end of it, that was some weird shit, right? Now we're 8 years later. The critique lands because of the problems of inflation and the border, the gender madness, which got the loudest applause when he said that it would be the policy of the United States to just have two genders, male and female. It lands, and people are more familiar with it. And to finish my catalog, he survived an assassination attempt. And I think one of the most memorable lines of this second inaugural address was when he said, God saved my life to make America great again. I now have a purpose and a sense of
I was saved by God to make
yeah.
America great again.
Right. The sense of providential working in the world. That is new to this speech. And I think he believes it. And I think his supporters believe it. And even as a bystander, it's hard not to escape the conclusion that had Trump not turned his head at exactly the right moment, we would be in a very different place as a country today than we are.
Yeah, and he also actually even strove for something inspirational here when he was talking about what he has endured. He's endured lawfare, and they've come for his freedoms, and they've come for his life. And he came back, and he said something to the effect of, "Let that, be a lesson to everyone out there who's doubting what they can do." And he said, "The impossible is what America does best." It's a good line, and it's not something that would have come out of his mouth the first time around.
And he said, "Sunlight is pouring all over this
world,
earth,
all over the earth." Yeah,
sunlight is
so. Well, the things that come out of his mouth are still remarkable. Yeah. We're taking back the Panama Canal. We are changing the name. Yeah, it's the Gulf of America now. We're going to Mars. There are a lot of big promises made in this speech, and that's something that I think he will have to live up to if he wants to have a successful second term.
See, I don't think that's new, right? Like, there was the Space Force. He talked about Mars in the first term. The renaming of Mount McKinley, the
his favorite president,
huh?
His favorite president,
right?
William McKinley.
So, I do think that in culture war terms, that line in his speech, "I was saved by God to make America great again," is the thing that actually, interestingly enough, will chill. We have this divide in the United States that I think is really best framed by people of belief versus people of no belief, or people who are church going, or whatever, and people who are not. Like, this is a very stark divide. If you do not have a life in which religion plays any role whatsoever, I think you are like 70 to 80% likely to be a Democrat. Certainly in the media, you are 90% likely to be a member of the liberal part of the American media. And I think when he said that, that's where they go, "Oh my God, he's crazy. He's a crazy person. He's insane," as though every leader in the history of mankind has not at some point or other, particularly if they are elected or have experiences like he's had, said, "God had a plan for me." First of all, everybody until a certain point believed that God had a plan for them, or wanted to believe that God had a plan for them. It is only our highly secular age in which that idea is sort of controversial or thought to be crazy. But you're going to see op-eds from now until Sunday about the theocracy, Trump believing now that he is beyond the reach of anything because God has touched him. Every leader thinks God has touched him. Obama thought God had touched him. Obama thought God had touched him, and that he was some version of Christ and God, both.
Obama thought God had touched us when Obama touched us.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, I think, though, that was not intended as the culture war part. The culture war part in the speech was obviously the gender stuff more than anything else. That's, I think, one of the big takeaways is going to be when people say, "Oh my God, he's insane. He thinks God, is playing a role in human affairs like this." And then all the people in the United States who are like, "Yeah, God plays a role in our lives, and God, and yes, had he not but turned his head half a millimeter, he would be dead right now. And so there's a reason this happened." Thinking that history, thinking that there's a guiding purpose and that there's a transcendent purpose in life is really, honest to God, is the real dividing line in the United States.
Yeah, I think if people make that critique, it's more about them than it is about either the American political tradition or American culture and society. Yeah. I was struck watching the inauguration First of all, I thought I kind of preferred it indoors. I liked the scene, the
Mhm.
beautiful rotunda, statuary hall. I think it's the rotunda they were in. Yeah,
So
and
yeah.
right, and you could hear it better.
Mhm.
I was going to say better acoustics, right?
Yeah.
Better acoustics. They weren't freezing to death. It was all I kind of like that. But and I was watching it. I was reminded of a line by former commentary assistant editor and contributor Irving Kristol, who wrote in the 1990s that conservatism is comprised of religion, nationalism, and economic growth. And you have that quote from Irving Kristol some 35 years ago, and you just lay it atop the speech that Donald Trump delivered,
But
and all the pageantry and all the hit lines. It was an amazing, I think, example of the power of those three ideas that still resonate today.
But let's pull back from the larger structure where he said, I want to be a peacemaker. We have liquid gold. I'm declaring an energy emergency.
Drill,
We're gonna
baby,
build
drill.
cars, all drill, baby, drill. To the very interesting fact that I think 2 minutes in, what he said was, what we have witnessed and what has basically brought me back to power is the failure of simple government administration. Like, not big, not American carnage, not our society has gotten diseased, but the people who have been running the mechanisms of government don't know what they're doing and have screwed up. And they screwed up in North Carolina. There are hurricane victims 6 months after the hurricane who haven't been properly treated. And then, of course, we have the fires in California. And I thought, man, you know what? If he's a focused person, he isn't. But if he can come to understand that his challenge is in some ways far less dramatic than everybody seems to think it is, that if he can just make things work better or play a role in things working better after this sort of 20-year period in which things seem to have stopped working, like one of our favorite long-term topics on this podcast from the 2017 Academy Awards, the wrong winner being listed to, 10,000 other things. It's a smaller challenge than keeping the world free and making America more prosperous than it has ever been. But it would make people feel a lot more comfortable if they could have confidence that elected officials are minimally competent. Like, there's a border and you enforce laws at the border. It's a smaller challenge.
Well, you want to talk about small things.
Go ahead.
We had an example today, right after his speech. Carrie Underwood was supposed to come out and sing God Bless America, and the audio accompaniment didn't work. And
she did it.
Came on for a second.
She did it a cappella.
Yeah,
right.
She did it a cappella, and everyone joined. So it was still a nice
it was a
moment.
perfect example of
we're already fixing things.
Incompetence of the small things, though. Yeah.
We're already.
But it's a good point.
If you get Carrie Underwood, problem solved.
I do think that this shift inside to the rotunda, this rally at the
Capital One
basketball arena of on 7th Street and all that. Actually, that seemed to have been done relatively gracefully, given the fact that they had to move everything indoors and that they'd had these giant events planned that they had to scuttle and then figure out how to smush them in. And I think, Matt, you're right that the dramaturgy of the day was actually very entertaining. It was like, now that the Oscars are boring and like award shows are boring, it had a kind of award show feeling. It's like, oh, look, there's what is Lauren Sanchez wearing?
Well, that's what Mark Zuckerberg was interested in as well.
But I mean, wait, who is that next to somebody?
That actually, the what are you wearing has
then of course Melania.
The women in my life have been pointing out that Oscar de la Renta dressing Ivanka Trump and Usher Vance and tweeting out that Oscar de la Renta is dressing them and what they're wearing is actually something of an earthquake in the politics is downstream from culture.
The vibe shift,
world.
the cultural vibe shift.
What they
I
were
do
wearing,
think-
weirdly enough, really actually did sort of signify something, some sort of acceptance, some sort of welcome to normalcy.
Yeah.
In a way that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise, but it's clearly noticeable too.
Having the 4 most powerful tech executives in the planet sitting behind the Trump family also signals some type of shift. I'm not actually sure how to describe
and
it,
then
but
Sergey
pretty
Brin
big.
showed up. And then Sergey Brin showed
Oh,
up.
I didn't know Brin was there.
Yeah,
I saw
there.
Suntar.
He came in the back or something. No, but so you've got that. I don't know why Melania wanted to look like Zorro, but okay, fine. She wants to look like Zorro. That's
very striking.
It's fine with me,
It was more Carmen Sandiego.
Maybe that's a little. I don't
For
know.
our purposes as a political podcast, we should
That
focus
is a very
on
important point because
Thank
Zorro,
you.
of course, is a Mexican hero, Matt, and so she was maybe
I've
signal a more Catholic attitude.
She looked beautiful.
Mexico. Yeah,
she looked beautiful. Yes. Okay. Who made it inside the rotunda and who had to sit in the Capitol Visitor Center?
Yes,
that is a very Washington game that is being played right now. And so I was interested that the senators were sitting in the rotunda, but the governors were in the Capitol Visitor Center. Right. So Glenn Youngkin, my governor here in Virginia, Greg Abbott of Texas, they were in the Visitor Center. They didn't get the prime seating like the tech bros and like the Supreme Court. The entire Supreme Court plus Breyer shows up as well.
Stephen Breyer retired.
It was quite a scene.
So here's some totally pointless observations I would like to make since we're here, like doing this fresh. Number one, Deb Fischer, the chairman of the inaugural on the Republican Senate side, very short. I didn't realize she was that short. I didn't actually realize that Alana Kagan is incredibly short. So I got and who was who helped point that out by in the camera angles was Barron Trump, who was apparently 6'9".
Well, he's very tall.
So he's 6'9", but I mean, then you have these women come in and they're like 5 feet tall, and so they're literally like 2 feet shorter than Barron Trump. So and I do also want to quick shout out to Amy Klobuchar, who made a terrific opening speech. And once again, and where you have one of those things where you run history backwards, Klobuchar was the obvious choice to be vice president in 2020. She came in third from a major, she was sort of a semi-swing state, Midwesterner. I know he said he was going to pick a black woman. Imagine a world in which he'd picked Klobuchar and not Kamala, and that 2024 had rolled around and that it had been Klobuchar and not Kamala. Anyway, I just thought it was.
He would have lost anyway.
Would have lost. Whatever. I know. Fair enough. Okay. Yeah. But the speech,
he wouldn't be there. But the question is, would Klobuchar have won? Right? Isn't that the question?
No. Well, yeah. I get. Anyway, so the interesting thing about the speech was that it started and restarted itself. It had about it a quality of many drafts, and then the drafts were strung together, and the introductory part of each draft was simply attached to the bottom of the introductory part of the final draft, because he just kept going back to say, today is the day of our liberation. Well, today America starts again. Today we are great again. Like he did it every.
There was repetition, minutes. But I will say, this is the speech that he should have given at the convention.
Yes.
If he had given this speech instead of the hour and a half speech, there would have been no question that he would have won. I mean,
right.
He still won. No, he
would have walked away with it.
And it was much more of a political speech than it was a classic inaugural speech. The inaugural addresses tend to be much more conceptual. They tend to be abstract, talk about pride in our country. This was a political speech through and through, talking about himself, his recent past, and the Biden agenda, with Biden sitting right there. It's pretty amazing. And then Bill was smiling. The best part was Biden was, he kind of had this just flat face when Trump was going after him. But if you look behind Biden, you would see Bill Clinton, and he was kind of smiling because he got what was going on.
Hillary was not.
It really wasn't smiling, but Bill was. And then there was the turn to action. What I'm going to do, specific policies. Again, it's not something you really associate with an inaugural address. And Trump's first inaugural was among the shortest in history, certainly the shortest of the most recent inaugurals. This one is kind of medium length, 40 minutes. It's not long, but it was not
But
not
we
short.
should also talk about what he didn't say that
Sure.
people thought he might say, right? So he said, I'm declaring a border emergency, and there's going to be this, this, and this to it. And he said, in something that's kind of very striking, you don't know quite what he means, because part of what he's talking about is legally controversial, if not, which is I'm going to send the military to the border. Now he can deploy the military anywhere. The military, under the Posse Comitatus Law of 1871, cannot be used as a police force, so it can't be used to arrest people. National Guardsmen can be used in different ways because they have a different legal standing, and they have been used that way in Texas and Arizona, I believe. But so he did say, I'm doing this on the border, and we are shutting down the border. He did not say in this speech that he was ending birthright citizenship,
Right.
and he did not talk about. I'm trying to think of. There were a couple of other things that we have been. Oh, he didn't talk about the January 6th pardons. He said nothing about pardoning anybody for January 6th. Which I think is, again, even if there had been a passage and somebody had said 5 minutes before the speech, do not talk about pardons. Today is the day that the world is going to be talking about Biden pardons. Don't do a thing. Do not complicate this disgrace that is going to help you launch your honeymoon here, which is Biden's final day, which we can get into. But assuming that he wasn't actually going to go there, it does raise interesting questions about what is sort of pie in the sky in the world of MAGAville, like ending birthright citizenship, and what he thinks practically he needs to do to score some victories, right? I mean, that's what we're going to see over the next month to 6 weeks. Is he going to do this? Government hasn't worked. I got to show that I know what I'm doing, and I got to show that I can put points on the board and give people a better sense of confidence in Washington. Or is he going to like go off and spend 3 weeks talking about Greenland and the Panama Canal? Did have the Panama Canal.
Yeah,
He
but
did
no-
have the
but no
Panama
Greenland.
Canal and
Yeah.
manifest destiny and territorial expansion
Yeah.
in the inaugural.
Yeah.
Pretty amazing. I think he's going to do it all. I mean,
But he doesn't have to do it all at once. Like, that's the thing. It's that impulse to do everything at once that trips these guys up, even if he is coming in essentially as a second term person. Like, be orderly about it.
Executive orders. So he is.
No, he is going to sign a lot of executive orders.
He's going to sign a lot of executive orders on day one.
I'm just talking about what he's going to stress, right?
Well, he also
What
stressed.
is he going to stress?
He stressed de-woking the military and reversing anti-American education.
Right.
Which I thought were both.
But the military, I think, was very interesting because it was so specific that he said not only was he going to, return the military to being a fighting force and stop the preachment, stop trying to brainwash the military into being woke warriors. He said every person in the military who was dismissed or suspended or whatever, discharged for not
complying,
for refusing the vaccine, would be reinstated with back pay. And again, very specific idea, not a huge number of people in that category. I mean, maybe a couple hundred, probably not much more than a couple hundred people.
I think there are a lot more.
Were in the military who were dismissed?
That were dismissed because of the vaccine. Yeah.
I mean,
but
really?
we can look that up.
Okay,
yeah,
I don't know. I'm sorry. I mean,
well, they weren't necessarily. I think that's right, because they weren't necessarily fired. There were people who were like, you could leave now and take whatever pension you have, sort of thing. And there were people who made the choice to do that.
Okay, I'm not. All I'm saying is that it's both small and focused and specific on a specific injustice that deserved correction and remediation with a larger point. right? With a
Mhm.
with a
Right.
larger point, which is a good way to make larger points.
8,000 people were
Making a
discharged.
larger point first and then doing the little policy second is where people start going, you're full of it. You don't mean it. You're just, whatever. Anyway, I thought that was
It's part
interesting.
of
Yeah,
the
I thought it was good.
competence thing too, though, because right, the MAGA world, but especially the culture war side of it and the tech side of it, the Elon Musk side, there's the idea, the prominent idea is that the wokeness there's an opportunity cost to wokeness, right? It's a distraction. Can't fight fires well if we're so focused on DEI and fire. We can't do this well if we're prioritizing that. So it's the culture war stuff also it blends well into the practical get things working again, because there really is a belief that we have distracted ourselves from the task at hand. And the military is a big part of that. What is the military for? Right? Used to be not very controversial. And now, there is this feeling, and Noah Rothman was on the podcast the other day telling us that, it is a legitimate, it is a legitimate cause of recruitment hemorrhaging in the military, that military families really are put off by this stuff. They really don't tell their kids to follow in their footsteps, stuff like that. So there is a sense of like, what is this thing for? What's the purpose? And the form will follow the function. And that's in that context is where all that woke stuff and Doge and whatever comes in.
A very important point is that the New York Times did the final poll, I guess, released Saturday, I think, of the Biden presidency on where issues stand. And the numbers on wokeness and trans were jaw-dropping. I mean, it's about 80% of people who say either this has gone far enough or it has gone way too far. And the number of people who say that the focus on trans has gone too far was 50%. And the number of people who said that we need to keep going in this route was 21%. Now, granted, sort that.
They all work at the New York Times.
And they all work at the New York Times. So, there was more than that. But I mean, that was the most striking top line number. Like, this is low hanging fruit for Trump and the Republicans, which is what nobody really understood. Particularly, I think this is what the tech company rush to Trump's side in part is about, which is they not knowing anything about public opinion except marketing as a matter of marketing and how to sell things to people. They got sold a bill of goods. They believed what they were being told by the liberal elites about how Americans were changing their social and political attitudes.
You know what?
Yep.
There's going to be no Women's March this time. Do you know why?
Why?
Because a huge chunk of the people on the Women's March have come to be anti-trans because they see
quietly.
What's that?
But quietly,
Fine.
because
Quietly
it's
or not.
still politically bad. It's still discomforting.
But they see it as endangering women in various situations and aspects of their lives.
Oh, the sports number. The
Right.
sports number was crazy. It was like 85% of people think that biological males should not be participating in women's sports. 85%, including 60% of Democrats or something like that. Like, that's why I say, like, part of the woke stuff is, I remember, I did some work as a freelance speechwriter in 1994 on the contract with them, on promoting the contract with America. I started a speechwriting firm, and we were contracted to write speeches about the contract with America. And the thing about the contract with America, which it was very supposedly very, very controversial, is that every single element of the contract with America was poll tested above 65%. Like, nothing that was in, not all of it got passed, by the way, obviously, including the tax cuts, which didn't pass through the Bill Clinton, 1995 after the Congress, after Republicans won Congress. But they went after low-hanging fruit. And just because liberals don't know what low-hanging fruit is, because they lie to themselves, or they live in this world in which you're not allowed to say what it is you think and all of that, Trump and the Republicans have been handed this gift which is all they have to do is say, no, we're stopping all of this. They don't even need to change anything, or you know what I mean? They just have to say,
Who
no,
was
we're
it?
ending these policies.
Who was it recently who said we're a nation of J.K. Rowlings? You know, we're all the whole
Oh,
nation. It's kind of adopted her like kind of shock at the radicalism of the left, specifically on the transgender issue, but
yeah.
more broadly about political correctness, DEI, and how, as Seth points out, how it's also a matter of basic competence. I thought it was interesting that Trump also had a shout out for his new coalition, talking about the Hispanic voters and African American voters who supported him this time around. It's another, again, change between 2017 and 2025. The country, or at least the electorate, is more Republican now than it was 8 years ago. There's a shift where now more people identify as Republicans than Democrats, and Trump is the beneficiary and in some ways the agent of that shift. And the more important cause, though, is the person who is now boarding his flight to California, where he will begin his retirement, his permanent retirement. Joseph Biden.
I want to get to him. I do want to point out one important aspect of the speech that, or not of the speech, but maybe of the moment. Trump is now 78 years old. I have to say he looked better than he's looked in years. Again, that's part of the thing about his new spirit. Like, he doesn't have the kind of like, it's not like his jaw was tight and his face was all, his body was taut with coiled energy or rage or anything like that. He had this kind of relaxed mien. And then standing there is his 40-year-old running mate, brings his 3 children, come out to stand there while he is sworn with their nanny. The nanny hands his daughter, whose name is Maribel, to Usha, his wife, who is 2, maybe? I don't even know, sucking her thumb. And she had 3 Band-Aids. She had Band-Aids on 3 of her fingers. So if you've had, children in the last 10 or 15 years, you will know that children have some fixation on particularly Paw Patrol. Band-Aids seem to have been, there were Dora Band-Aids when my kids were very little, but I mean, Paw Patrol Band-Aids, I thought one of them was Paw Patrol on her fingers. And it was like this startling moment of a kind of glimpse into a very interesting American future, because there you have J.D. Vance, the representative of MAGA, white, hillbilly, we've been left behind culture with his Indian wife, his sort of mixed race is not the right term, no. But South Asian and hillbilly children. She's a successful, she's a lawyer, he's a lawyer, she's apparently a dynamo. She's 40 years old with 3 kids, while being a dynamo, and is holding her daughter with the 3 Band-Aids. I mean, I'm sorry, but
he's
talk
bringing
about
beards
relatable
back to the White House. First beard in the White House in a very long time.
Right. But I mean, just talk about like relatable. Like we did not think this was not the J.D. Vance that we knew. And some of us know J.D.
Well, I
Vance.
think it's the same J.D. Vance.
It is, but
he's had an incredible journey of his own. From being a Trump critic to now being the vice president of the United States. And you say, the vision of a future. That I think it's the vision of our future. Right. Maybe 4 years from now.
But what I mean is, what I mean is that you cannot caricature the horrible mistake that the liberals made in the last 4 years. Was this caricature that basically the J6 protesters and the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, that's who was voting for Trump.
Right.
And then the New York Times publishes this amazing map on Friday, which is this color map of every precinct in the United States. Just go search for it. And the shift from 2020 to 2024. And everything moved red. When I say everything, I mean everything moved red. If you were in a red state, it got redder. If you were in a blue state, it got redder. If you were in my precinct, which went 91 to 8 for Biden, it went 87 to 12 for Harris. Every single spot in the United States moved to the right in the 2024 election. It's
Having
uncanny.
grown up in New Jersey, it's wild to look at the New Jersey
Yeah.
version of that and make
Right.
it look like it's some sort of swing state,
Yeah.
which
John,
not.
I think
But I
that-
mean, the movement is so.
It's an interesting sort of addendum to your point that you made on an earlier podcast last week, saying, well, Trump didn't. This wasn't a blowout election, right?
Right.
By the numbers, but in this sense, it was.
It wasn't a blowout. That's one of the reasons that he's got to tread carefully, because he did not win a landslide in any conventional sense, right? He basically won the same number of electoral votes that he won in 16 and that Biden won in 20 and that he won this time. And he won by 1.5 points. And he just got either slightly under or just to 50%. But in winning the popular vote. So this is not a landslide as we would understand it.
But it is a countrywide shift.
But the evolutionary shift is astounding. Yeah. Like, you would think some places would, have gone in the other direction. I mean, that's how Biden won in 2020, there was a reversal of field, right? I mean, he won 5 states that Trump had won. In 2016, he reversed field there and took them, and then it all just sort of those states reverted back to a kind of mean, and everything else in Liberalville was more like, I don't know, for whatever reason, Biden's too old, Biden's senile, I don't like the policies, inflation, whatever. Everything moved, and it is the source of, if they're going to continue imagining that the Republican Party is just this white redneck party, when it's the party of J.D. Vance, who is the redneck who made good. It wasn't even really a redneck, but from a hillbilly background who made good, what goes to Yale, goes into the military, goes to Yale, becomes a senator, becomes vice president of the United States, married again to somebody who is the daughter of immigrants, right? Who is herself and a father of 3 small children and all of that. Like, you're making a big mistake. You are underestimating the depth of this change.
This is the state of the Democratic Party as Biden leaves office. It has no leader. No one's paying any attention to the race for the DNC chair because the job doesn't matter. The party is split. There are some Democrats who will be voting. They have already voted for the Laken-Riley Act in the House. They're going to vote on it in the Senate tonight. They will have bipartisan support. Who are the most prominent Democrats right now are dissidents, people like John Fetterman, Richie Torres, Eric Adams, who I think was at the inauguration.
He is working that pardon.
And I have to tell you, maybe he'll change his party. I have to tell you, it's all Biden's fault. Mm-hmm. It's amazing. It's all Biden's fault, and it was just as if he wanted to remind us that it was his fault. In his last act as president, he pardoned everyone in his family except Jill, which I think is interesting. It's like it's Hunter's clean. That was December's disgrace. Today's was the sister, the brothers, and their spouses. And Lady McBiden, she's still, look, Republicans in Congress, you can still go for Dr.
Matt
Jill.
Continetti did not invent the term Lady McBiden.
No, that's the reference.
The term Lady McBiden, Matt.
Alexandra Pelosi.
Nancy Pelosi's daughter, in an interview with Politico, documentary filmmaker, interesting person, by the way, makes interesting,
very interesting
person.
Said, yeah.
Lady McBiden shouldn't be attacking my mom. She should be looking in the mirror. I mean, that's the state of the Democrats. Crack up, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Okay. So that was and then the two New York Times pieces about how everybody knew Biden was senile. Like let's muddy the water. Let's gaslight you out as he's going out the door, so that if you say to us years from now you were covering up for Biden, the New York Times people could say, "What? We published these two pieces. Here they are. Look." One says this, and one's Schumer did this, and everybody knew that if it was after 2:00, you better not bring bad news to Biden and stuff like that. All of this, and then of course the pardons uh, at 11:45 a.m. of Jim,
following the pardons earlier this morning.
Yeah.
The preemptive pardons of Milley, Fauci, and the members of the January 6th committee, members and staff, I believe.
Yes. So the fulfillment of every berserk, oh, you MAGA people, you're all crazy fantasies have now been given, have basically now been proven not fantasies by the behavior of Biden out the door, using the excuse of, well, they're crazy and they're gonna be mean to my family, and they're gonna be mean to poor Tony Fauci and Mark Milley, and so I better pardon everybody on my way, along with the 4,000 criminals that he let go, and then the commutation
of Leonard Peltier,
a man who killed two, was it either National Guardsmen or policemen in the 1970s, a Native American activist, and therefore supposedly either they deserved it, or he didn't do it, or he didn't do it and they deserved it, and he did do it but they deserved it, and he didn't mean to do it. He's
an activist in the same way that Mangione is an activist.
Yeah, I used to know something about this case. Like I once learned a lot about it because it wrote like 35. It's been on the liberal docket for 35 years, but I've forgotten everything I learned about it, and I refuse to read another word.
So I have learned over the weekend, or since I've been gone from the podcast, I've learned that you can simply will a constitutional amendment into existence.
That's right.
And so I would like to announce today that I have willed what will, I guess, accepting the logic of former President Biden, be the 29th Amendment to the Constitution, which is twofold. One, you can't make pardons in the lame duck period. And two, the pardons you do make need to be approved by Congress. I'm going to let the people decide. I'm a very open-minded person. I'm going to let the people decide whether Congress can approve it by just a simple majority or by 2/3 vote. That's up for the people to. But Biden's reckless disregard for the rule of law since Kamala Harris lost the election in November, I think, necessitates a new amendment to the Constitution.
Why
restricting the pardon power?
Sarah Isker has a piece up at the Dispatch in which she points out that Biden might be the most lawless president in American history. If you take from the beginning of his administration to the end, the actions that he took or announced by executive order or by fiat that he knew and everybody knew were willfully unconstitutional, and did them anyway, and therefore wasted the courts and America's and the public's time adjudicating them, only to find that they were in fact unconstitutional. And I'm not going to rehearse what they are now. You could, aside from student debt is the most obvious, but I mean there were 7 or 8 major.
The employer vaccine mandate, right?
The when he tried to make
mandate, the entire world,
suspension of rents. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's all kinds of these emergency things that he did. Anyway, but I mean, the piece is very convincing, and Sarah is is not a MAGA person. So she writes for the Dispatch, which is not a MAGA site. It's an impressive marshaling of argument, and I think today just puts paid to that. It's like, okay, yeah, guess what? We are the Biden crime family. Nothing we did from 2014 until now, everything is now beyond the reach of any investigative body. I mean, you can investigate them. You could be Congress and have a committee and waste your time. There will be no prosecutions of anybody for anything. And it's almost like saying, yeah, you know what? Yeah, we took the money from China. You know what Tony Dokapil said back in 20? It's true. It's all true. Now I'd like Scrooge McDuck. He is going to go back to Rehoboth and swim in his basement full of money. I mean, what else are we to think here? When he said in an interview the other day, Hunter's making a really great living with his painting. I'm so proud of him.
Well, I think some of the paintings were lost to the fire. So
maybe that's why he set the fire. All right. I'm not going to go there. All right. Okay. So is there anything... I just want to say that we did a McLaughlin lightning round at the end of the Friday podcast where we said what were the odds that he was going to pardon.
So I heard.
And it was 100% basically. Seth was at 90, so Seth gets...
I was at 90 because I wanted to allow for the possibility he would forget.
Okay. But we did not... I don't think we deserve that much credit because we did not know that the other 4 family members, aside from his brother Jim, were going to get pardoned. So, which raises the question, why are they being pardoned?
Well, I mean,
I'm sorry. It raises the question.
Is there a legal version? Is there a legal version of the Streisand effect?
Well, it's the Biden family business.
What is Sarah Owens Biden doing that we need to know about?
She's part of the family business, which is trading his name for money
from foreign
foreign actors, among others. Yeah, man, that's kind of clear now, and it's kind of just
Peter Schweitzer. People owe the number of apologies that are owed by every single person who has covered this administration and covered Biden from 2019 on. I'm not even going to go into the laptop, but I mean that has covered this guy for years. The apologies that are owed to people who said, "Oh, this is just beneath contempt. How dare you? Don't you know that his wife and daughter were killed in a car accident? His son died of cancer. Leave the man alone. He's in pain, and he's got a son who's got a drug problem. Leave him alone. How dare you, you monster?" And basically Biden just said, yeah, it's all true.
But, this is where his cognitive debilitation actually helped him, because the more helpless he seemed, the more sympathetic he became in a certain way. It became harder to paint him as sitting at the top of this crime family.
Also, you would think that, but that's not really what the polls show, right? I mean, in a weird way, the more it was apparent that he's not there, the less popular he became.
Right. Yeah, for other reasons, I think, though. But yeah,
but the media still rallied behind him, and just go back to the Comer committee that we had been following on the podcast, looking into this. The entire time, the chorus from the media was, "There's no evidence here. Look at this fishing expedition." Well, in light of the pardons, Hunter's in December, and then these pardons today, you have to say that Comer is owed an apology, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think
Comer has a book coming
you're making
out,
the Robert Hur point, right?
Yes.
Really, which is like he's sympathetic as a a sort of addled old uncle who just tottering around, and he did do these wrong things. We found him, but we can't prosecute him because if you put this old guy in front of a jury, they're going to be like, that's kind of basically Robert.
Okay, but that's exactly what happened in America. Imagine a world in which Biden had decided in early 2023 that he was not going to run for office. He was going to retire and let the Democratic Party choose another nominee to run in 2024. Every action that he would have taken during that lame duck 2 years would have been viewed sympathetically by Democrats, would have been viewed, even getting to this point, there would have been a sense, let him pardon his son and his brother, it's like, okay, look, he did, he got us through Trump. It'll be over. He got, we'll find somebody else is going to run. He drained the reservoirs of sympathy for himself on his own side while simultaneously driving all of us crazy because we were sitting here, not them, not they. He wasn't our candidate, saying, this guy can't be president. He's non compos mentis. What the hell is going on? And here he is now, basically a marionette for whoever was actually making policy over the last year. And somebody put the piece of paper under him and said, Jim must have said, you better pardon my wife, because her names are on some of the checks. I mean, I don't know. Somebody made the decision to not just be his brother, whom we know was in business with Hunter. We didn't know anybody else was in business with Hunter. Anyway, all right. So that's it for Biden. He is an unperson. I think people don't quite understand how much of an unperson he's going to be. Bill Clinton, I am reminded, did last day pardons in 2001, most notoriously of Mark Rich, the fugitive financier, but there were a couple other people. And it was extraordinarily damaging to him. Like, he was not seen in Democratic circles for quite a while. Like, he was not, oh, we loved him, what a great president, da da da. Like, first of all, they were sick of him from Lewinsky and all that, but that was a real moment in America, like, where Democrats who had defended him were like, okay, oh no, this was a bridge too far. We said it was okay.
His public approval ratings were like 30 points higher than Biden. So imagine how much of an unperson Biden is going to be in those circles.
Yeah, and he's got nothing, he'll have nothing to say. Right. And like Matt said, this is all Biden's fault. I mean, Trump may have won anyway because the Democratic Party or the liberals reached this level of out of touchness that meant that they didn't know that that it was okay to say that boys shouldn't be beating up girls on a football field or, whatever, or in a swimming match or whatever swimming match. They lost the thread of normal, ordinary life, but still.
But Biden left the party in a shambles. I mean, people not talking, airing their dirty laundry, pardons left and right.
What Matt said about the DNC chair is like, it reminds me of the old Statler and Waldorf bit from the Muppets, where they have their perfect seats, on the balcony looking right over the stage. And in one of the skits, somebody asks, hey, how did you get such great seats? And they go, we entered a contest. We lost.
Yeah.
That's what the DNC chair feels like. How did you become the DNC chair? I drew the short straw.
So Ezra Klein of the New York Times has a very interesting, inadvertently interesting piece this weekend about how Democrats feel that they lost social media, right? They lost social media and they don't understand how it happened. Trump seems to understand social media in a way that they just never understood social media. Now, this is an astonishing thing to say, since, of course, in 2020, they so understood social media that they bullied all the social media platforms into suppressing stories about anything they wanted to have the social media platforms suppress. So they knew plenty about social media and its power, as long as they could use their enforcement mechanisms of social, including sort of their own brainwashing of their own liberal followers and everything else. But I was struck by this because it said, like, at some point, look, it's just like what the right knows about social media is the Democrats use social media, but the right understands that they are social media. They're supposed to be social media. It's them, and they're on social media, and they're doing it, and they're making outrages, and they're doing this. And Democrats are too serious about policy to do that kind of thing. And, and I will now explain to you why Democrats lost social media. And wokeness is the reason. And I say this because when you live in a world in which every word that comes out of your mouth, you are scared, excuse me for saying this, shitless, that if you say niggardly, that you will be fired because the word niggardly sounds like a bad word. There's
a politician who lost his seat or something for that.
No, there was somebody in the DC City Council. I think this is actually long ago, but I'm just saying, if you live in a world in which every single word of yours is like a death trap, a potential death trap, as opposed to the right that decided at some point around 2021 that, like, no, but there was immunity. Like there was total immunity. You could practically say or do anything.
Blanket
And
pardon.
Elon Musk came in, bought Twitter, and said, just say anything. And Kamala Harris couldn't use social media because she was tied up in knots, because all of these politicians are tied up in knots because there are landmines every half step they take in every single direction. And they can't get out of their own way.
I think there are a few more factors.
Except to say Trump's a fascist. That's it. That's fine.
I think there are a few more factors here. Right-wing social media is a response, in part, to the left's dominance of media.
Right.
So the left pushed the right into being social media, as
Right.
they say. That's part of it. Also, the Democrats, left, they go about social media, particularly I'm thinking about the Democratic Party here, in an inorganic way, right? They tried to strangle, they tried to lean on social media companies to suppress the story. They had paid armies of TikTokers and whatnot. That's not how it worked or how it works for the majority of the right. It's an organic response to the left's dominance of media.
But they could do it badly, and I think, and the thing is that in 2012, the idea was that the Obamans and these people, they were Silicon Valley. There was a complete mind meld between Silicon Valley and the Democratic Party, or the Obama universe, right?
There was a revolving door between Silicon Valley and the Biden administration 4 years ago. He started his administration, there were people who were leaving and coming and going, and basically there was a sense of the legal people who worked on the boards of these Silicon Valley companies coming in, and the legal people, the legal executives were coming on precisely because they knew we were going to be having this fight, and the Biden administration was arming up to do what Democrats wanted to do to social media in that way.
I think it goes down to the fact that the Democrats become the party of rule makers, and the Republicans are now the party of rule breakers.
Right.
The bad boys. Right.
That's a total right. That's a colossal
reversal
shift. I mean, social cultural shift like that we haven't even begun to scratch the surface of.
And so, they were making the rules from Silicon Valley during the Obama administration and into the Biden administration. They make the rules that govern the economy when they get in charge of the elected branches of government. And the Republicans have adopted this mentality of the outlaw, and think about Trump's official portrait for his 47th, for his second term as the 47th president. The first official portrait from 2017 to 2021 was a much more traditional presidential portrait, greeting people and entering a government building, Trump smiling. Now the new one is patterned off of his mugshot, right? And it's that same look. And that represents a certain edge, I think, that the Democrats kind of used to possess when they were, when they had when their roots in the counterculture were more recent, right? But now they just seem like a bunch of boring people who are kind of have nothing to say of any originality and who want to suppress different points of view rather than embrace them.
And they're all scared of each other.
They're terrified of the identity politics.
That's what I mean. Like they can't say anything because identity politics is always a growth field, right? So it's always looking for a new sub identity to advance that, and the way they advance is to be offended, to be a subject of outrages, to claim that they are being discriminated against, and therefore to throw themselves on, which is basically, sort of like the Hamas encampment people who are breaking laws and then claiming that they are the ones who are being suppressed when they're refusing to allow Jews to walk on campus. So let's transition from there to what happened on Sunday, the release of the three hostages back into Israel. Um, the meeting, the tearful meetings with their families, the joy expressed in Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, and the political crisis that is now beginning in Israel over the next 6 weeks, which will either see we'll see 33 of the 95 hostages emerge over 6 weeks, leading then to the question of what happens to the other 66, 65, or it won't happen, and or something will happen that means that Hamas has violated the ceasefire that will impel Israel to start fighting again, which will then lead to accusations that Bibi Netanyahu needed to hold his fire because of the hostages. So on the one hand, joy; on the other hand, the anxiety is just beginning.
Yeah, I mean, we sat through the weekend with Hamas missing the deadline repeatedly to announce the names of the three hostages. We nearly went into the release without knowing their names. I mean, it was like just a couple hours before practically they were transferred to Red Cross vans. So I think Hamas is going to Hamas has proved that over the course of this war that they really understand the art of emotional torment, that it's very important to them to make people emotionally and psychologically suffer in Israel and around the world as part of their strategy. And so they're not going to follow the ceasefire by, they're going to violate the ceasefire in 1,000 different ways because they're going to do stuff like this, not give you the names. And by the way, people looking at the hostage list, they knew that, and we talked about this last week, that the choreographing of the return of the hostages was very important, right? Because Israelis wanted live hostages back first. They understand they're getting bodies at some point during the ceasefire, but they said, you can't give us bodies first because imagine what the reaction will be. I mean, the orchestration of the optics of the whole thing is very important. And Hamas is playing with them over that, and is going to be. And so when you don't know who the names are until right before they're going to be released, it means you also don't know who's still alive. You also, right? And Hamas is, according to the terms of the deal, 7 days into the ceasefire, Hamas is to give the Israelis a full report on which captives are still alive and which are not. They have a week into the ceasefire.
And
nobody believes that's actually going to happen, that they're going to give a full report. They want they want everybody to wonder who's alive and who's dead. They want everybody to wonder who's really coming out. In the first ceasefire deal, they released someone that they had said was dead. So, this is it's a long period now of this kind of anxiety. And we know that this is not the fog of war or anything. This is not a mistake. This is not chaos. Hamas has a very specific policy of making people suffer emotionally, mentally, and draining the Jewish state and Jews around the world along in this process.
I don't see how you can watch what unfolded over the weekend and believe that there's any possibility to a Palestinian state as long as Hamas exists. The way in which they have orchestrated this transfer in order to be a propaganda victory. Mm-hmm. I think they're lying, by the way. It's a psychopathic genocidal organization. Of course, it's going to lie at every turn. I think there's real damage that's been done to Hamas in this war. And so the crowing and the celebration of this ceasefire and the surrounding of these three poor girls as they leave the car by this braying mob of males with the Hamas soldiers on top of the car, it's all regime propaganda, and I don't think anyone should be fooled by it. I think they've been very much weakened by this war, and I
Look,
think
it's not just that, by the way. I mean, because the Israelis can get fooled too, and this is part of the psychological torment. So one of the things that happened is that Hamas emerges from the Nasser hospital, back in uniform, right? The ceasefire's in place, and suddenly marching out from a hospital complex, which, as you know, can't possibly be a terrorist site because it's a hospital, and how dare you even claim such a thing? Um, Hundreds of them come out in Hamas uniform. And so the Israelis
with
who want there
weapons
to,
that were not being stored at the Nasser medical
yeah,
complex. They
and
all
they
had
want,
guns too.
right. And the Israelis who want the war to be over are going to use this to say, why are we even doing this? See, they're still there. We spent 15 months fighting this, and they're still there. But for all we know, that's all they are. You know what I mean? Like, for all
I
we
really
know,
don't know.
because
Yeah,
it depends on what angle you take the photo of. If you take an angle of the car, if the close up of the car coming, of people coming, the girls coming out in the car is close up, it looks like total insane, riotous chaos. If you see a picture from 250 meters away, there
right,
weren't that many people there. And
right.
Hamas has been decimated. I mean, first of all, its leadership has entirely been decimated. There's one major leader left. Everybody else has been killed. We don't know how many fighters are left. The Israelis don't know how many fighters are left. Now there is a propaganda war on, and the propaganda war on is going to be about whether or not Israel has the stomach to go back to fight the war should Hamas break the terms of the ceasefire. A lot of negotiating time was spent over the weekend ensuring that the Americans in particular, and would say Israel has the right to restart the war. And Matt, you said you can't see a Palestinian state. Well, so the good news, if you are somebody who thinks that that's an obvious thing to determine from what's gone on in the last 15 months, is that the incoming ambassador, Mike Huckabee, literally said as much
Yeah,
on television yesterday. He said there was a Palestinian state. It was called Gaza. Look how that turned out.
I mean, he's right.
And he is right. And it's something that I believe, Mike Waltz thinks, the national security advisor. And, I'm sure Marco Rubio believes. I mean, even if you think that at some point in some indeterminate future, there will have to be a two-state solution. We are now, Oslo was 30 years ago. We got another 30 years to go. In other words, it's like, it really is like the Israelites.
The ability. I mean,
They have to die. These generations have to die.
the way that they turn on a dime, like the Stalinist Comintern, is amazing. Going from it's a genocide, it's a genocide, it's a genocide to we won, we won, we won. More victories ahead. This is a group of people who are murderers, awful, out of their minds. You can't deal with them. The best we can hope for is that we get as many of these hostages out before this deal collapses under its own weight. But it will collapse because
Right.
you're dealing with the devil.
Right.
And
that's
we
the
also
problem.
think the problem of the campus thing, which is in 2014, Israel also went into Gaza, right, and you know did not exactly get pushed around. I mean, Israel, I'm going to say won wars. We're fighting over one. Obviously, Israel is the stronger party. Went in 2014 to make a point and came back out. But in 2014, you didn't have the orchestrated statements coming out of campus groups and youth groups and NGOs and whatever in America saying this is the greatest victory against imperialism in history, right? In other words, there's a weird chorus that is egging them on in ways that they haven't been egged on.
Right. That's very true. So in 2014, most of the focus if there was focus on this, was Israel's going too far. Like, okay, they're firing all these rockets at Israel, but the rockets are all getting shot down anyway. And why do they have to go in? And okay, they went in, but they're doing their same stuff. Like, they're hitting too hard. It's too much. They should leave. John Kerry is the Secretary of State. He's doing, like shuttle diplomacy between Gaza City and Jerusalem, blah, 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 blah. But it was all the focus was, this is ridiculous. Hamas can't score points on Israel. Israel's like too strong, and Israel is not suffering very much. And so we just have to okay, there's this one town, Sderot. It's pretty bad there, but the rest of the country is fine. The difference now is, Hamas showed it could kill and wound 5,000, do the equivalent of like 10 9/11s inside Israel and force Israel into this 15-month war. So it did real damage, real pain, real suffering, real horror. And because it proved effective in that way, suddenly had actual open support. That's the conundrum here, is that what it took for Hamas to become a rallying point for so many people was that it showed its effectiveness, which is why, in reverse, Israel has to win this war in order to show that this is it, and say to Iran, and then say to Saudi and everybody else, we're here forever. Nobody F's with us. You know what? We tear each other apart, and our hearts are broken, and but we are not stopping until we win. Because when you show that you have skin in the game, people rally to your side, and show you have you've done something daring, or you've done something bold, or you've done something that's world changing. Suddenly you give people, even if it's evil, some kind of weird cause to rally behind. That's what's new.
As it stands now, the pro-Hamas protesters in the street are saying this is the beginning of the resistance. It's still not over, right?
Yeah.
So I agree. Israel has to make it over, and then it's over.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see, but it doesn't feel like it did in January. I do have to say, no. I mean, there are these rallies, there are people marching on 6th Avenue.
But that is in part a function of the string of Israeli success.
Exactly. Yes. So that's why this moment is fraught with peril, because the question is, if Israel starts looking like, I mean, what is it that Golda Meir said? She actually said, when Israelis were willing, to speak politically incorrectly about the Arabs, she said, when the Arabs care about their children as much as we care about our children, then we can make peace with them. But they don't care. They don't mind if their kids die, and we can't bear it. And I mean, that was a kind of that was a general sentiment in Israel until Oslo. Was, they live in a death cult. They don't care, make peace with us. Look what happened. It took 2 years for the Camp David Accords to be reached once Sadat flew to Jerusalem. 2 years. It took.
It was when the Arabs love their children more than they hate us.
Oh, right. Okay. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, there are also corollaries in the, we're suspending a war to get back 100, and listen, 1,900 prisoners are going to come out. And the horror story is that thousands of Israelis are likely to die in the next, or likely or possible will die in the next 20 years from the release of those prisoners in order to save 98 Israelis now. Right, that's the Sinwar story, right? 1,120 people came out for Gilad Shalit. One of them was Yahya Sinwar, and 5,000 people were killed and injured on October 7th because of the release of Yahya Sinwar from an Israeli jail. Something like that is going to happen.
And the Israeli media was covering it as it was going, meaning, he came out in 2011. By 2014, there was already a body count from people who had been released in that deal, and the media was already covering it. So it's something that they pay attention to. They pay close attention to.
But remember,
it's something that they watch.
So the hostages, everyone is like, this could be my kid. This could be my kid. I would do exactly what they're doing to get their kids out. But the cost could be, emotionally astronomical. And it's horrible to do these kind of calculuses. But this was why the policy through the 1980s everywhere after what happened in the 1970s was don't negotiate with terrorists, because the end result is more terrorism. Like, it's not that you get, you solve a problem, you create more problems than you solve. And in Israel's case, that is actually dead soldiers and dead people in terrorist attacks. And again, if they crush Hamas and they really, it will be a different world, and it won't be so easy for terrorist groups to reconstitute themselves.
I would like to read a quote to end the program.
Okay.
So you just let me know when you're ready.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Because this is Martin Luther King Jr. Day that we're recording this on, and I just want to quote Martin Luther King here. Peace for Israel means security, and we must stand with all of our might to protect its right to exist, its territorial integrity, and the right to use whatever sea lanes it needs. I see Israel, and never mind saying it, as one of the great outposts of democracy in the world, and a marvelous example of what can be done, how desert land can be transformed into an oasis of brotherhood and democracy. Peace for Israel means security, and that security must be a reality. He said that on March 26, 1968, just a few days before the assassin killed him. And so, of the many things we can learn from Martin Luther King, support for Israel is among them.
We'll be back tomorrow. For Matt, Seth, and Abe, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.